Hi, my name is Peter Wilder, and I am an HVACR Drives Application Engineer at ABB. Today I'd like to quickly show you how to use the BACnet mailbox function that's available on the ACH580 E-Clipse bypass. Now you may be wondering, what's the purpose of the mailbox function? Well, the mailbox function allows you to access drive parameters that are not linked to a predefined BACnet object, for example an AV or BV point. So for example, in the drive on our 580 E-Clipse bypass, AV9 is the kilowatt hour meter, and that links to drive parameters 0119 and 0120, okay, in the drive. Now, let's say you want to access drive parameter 0510, the control board temperature. Well, you'll notice in the BACnet object instance summary list, there's no parameter that links, or no object I should say, that links to drive parameter 0510. So you'd say, well, it's not accessible over BACnet. Well, in reality, it is accessible using the mailbox function feature that we have. So I'm going to show you how to do this. Now, if you're not familiar with the ACH580 E-Clipse bypass package, both the drive and the bypass are set up as independent nodes on the network. So even though it's one physical package unit, and you land the wires at one point, the RS-45 wires, onto the bypass, when you set up both the drive and the bypass, you'll set them up as independent nodes, so they have separate MAC addresses and separate object instance numbers. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to access a parameter in both the drive, and then I'm going to show you also using YAB how to access a parameter in the bypass. Now, to do this in the chart on the right, you'll notice there's two separate columns there on the far left. There's the drive object ID numbers that we'll use, AV25, AV26, and BV15 for accessing drive parameters. And then when we want to access a bypass parameter, we're going to use AV13, AV14, and BV21 to do this. Now, before I demonstrate using the software tool YAB how to access a drive parameter using the mailbox function, I just want to go through the steps that I'm going to execute on the software tool. So for accessing a drive parameter, here are the steps. Okay, first we need to make sure object ID BV15 is set to inactive. We then need to set AV25, the present value of AV25, to the parameter we want to access. So we're going to try to look at drive parameter 0510, okay, which is the control board temperature. So we're going to set AV25, the present value, to 510. The next step is go back to BV15, set it to active, and then the fourth step here, we're going to go look at AV26, and the present value of AV26 will be the value that is in the parameter we're attempting to read that we previously set in AV25. Now, if you want to look at a different parameter, what you want to do is just repeat steps 1 through 4. To access a bypass parameter, the steps are identical for the drive, except they're different bypass object ID numbers. So first we're going to start out by setting BV21 to inactive, or make sure it's set to inactive. We are then going to set the present value of AV13 to the bypass parameter we want to access. So for the example I'm going to show you in YAB, I'm going to access bypass parameter 0114, which is the megawatt hour saved. Then I'm going to set BV21 to active, and then I'm going to go look at the present value of AV14, which will be the value in the parameter 0114 that I had set up in AV13. Now, if I want to access a different parameter in the bypass, I will want to re-execute steps 1 through 4 in order. Let me now demonstrate how to read a drive parameter using the software tool YAB. Now, as I mentioned earlier, when you work with an ACH580 E-Clipse bypass, you're going to have two separate nodes on the network for the one physical drive bypass package. So device instance object 10 here is my drive. So I want to make sure I've selected or addressing that object when I want to read a drive parameter. So the first step is I want to make sure or verify BV15 is set to inactive, or in this case 0. I'm then going to go down to object ID AV25 and set the present value here to the parameter I want to read. In the examples I was discussing earlier, it will be the drive control board temperature, which is drive parameter 0510, or I can just enter 510. I'm now going to go back to BV15, set this to active, or in this case 1. And now I'll go look at the present value of AV26, and that will be the value in parameter 0510, which is 111 degrees Fahrenheit, which are the units. Fahrenheit are the units on the control panel screen. So this matches what's on the drive control panel. Let me now demonstrate how to access a bypass parameter using the software tool Yabe. Now you'll notice here I have the E-Clipse bypass as a device on my network. So I want to make sure I'm accessing or linking to this device on my network, not the drive when I want to access a bypass parameter. So to start out with, I want to make sure BV21 is set to inactive. So here 0, just hit enter again, make sure it's inactive to start with. I'm now going to go to AV13. I'm going to set this to the bypass parameter I want to access. In the example I gave, it's parameter 0114, or megawatt hours saved. So I'll just enter in 114. I'm now going to go back to BV21 and set this to active, or 1, the present value here. And now I'm going to go look at the present value of AV14, and that is 146 megawatt hours saved, which matches what I see on the E-Clipse bypass control panel screen. So I verified that it is working correctly. If you have questions about how to use the mailbox function to read a drive or bypass parameter on the ACH580 E-Clipse bypass, please do not hesitate to reach out to your local ABB representative.